Good afternoon and welcome to the Prince George's County Memorial Library System's weekly community conversation event, Thursdays at 4 p.m. My name is Nick. I'm the COO for Communication and Outreach at the library. Today we have a very special event being presented by our partners and friends at the Prince George's County Human Relations Commission, which is our county's civil rights enforcement and education agency. We are celebrating and commemorating Ramadan, and we're going to learn a lot about the tradition and how we can all come to acknowledge and recognize and respect it if we are not necessarily of the Muslim faith. We're going to be joined by a wonderful colleague who has joined us in the Women in Faith series, of which this is an event as well, Women in Faith, Diverse Voices Speak. And so we're going to be joined by Rahmah Abdulaleem, who is the Executive Director of Karama, which serves the community here in the Washington, D.C. area and beyond. Ms. Abdulaleem was raised in Philadelphia and was an active member in Masjid Allah in Philadelphia during her youth. Apologies if I didn't pronounce that very well. She is a product of the Philadelphia public school system and also a proud graduate of the Philadelphia High School for Girls. She went on to study at Duke University with a double major in religion and sociology and a certificate in markets and management studies. And yes, those are all related. And she obtained her JD from the University of Michigan Law School, which is, of course, very impressive, and worked at a top international corporate law firm for 14 years and has represented clients in a variety of types of cases and certainly an advocate for the wellness of humans generally through the legal system and the justice system. She's also served as a cadet troop leader for a Muslim Girl Scouts troop in Maryland since 2016, has been on the board of the Capital Area Muslim Bar Association as treasurer, and continues to represent the Bar Association as its representative on the National Association of Muslim Lawyers. Presently, she is Executive Director of Karama, Muslim Women Lawyers for Human Rights, where she works to create a global network of advocates knowledgeable about the gender equitable principles of Islam and are able to advance the cause of Muslim women's rights in legal and social environments. We are so thrilled to have Rahmah back for the third appearance in virtual library / HRC land since we started COVID times, and we are in spring 2021. There's hope in our midst now, and we're so grateful to have this wonderful conversation today. So I'm going to welcome up Rahmah and also Kyla Hannington, our colleague from Human Relations Commission, who will be doing today's interview. Welcome.
Hi, thank you so much, Nick.
No problem.
Appreciate that. Hi, Rahmah.
Hey, Kyla, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I am excited. This is like our favorite time of year when Ramadan is coming. It's like, okay, it's almost here. What do we need? And so I'm excited to be here today.
I am so excited that you're here and to learn more about Ramadan, about which, I confess that I do not know a huge amount. So I'm wondering if we can just actually start with you telling us maybe just in broad strokes, like, what is Ramadan?
Okay, well, Ramadan is a month in the Islamic calendar, but it is one of the favorite months for all Muslims, because that's the month where the Holy Quran was first revealed to Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. So every year we celebrate that with a month of fasting. And it's really a month of reconnecting with your community, reconnecting with your soul, reconnecting with your religion. It's like some things you might slack off other times of the year, but during Ramadan, you come back with like a full fervor of like, okay, I'm a Muslim and this is what I'm going to do. It's Ramadan. So I jokingly tell my non-Muslim friends, you always know that there's some Christians that you only see at Christmas or only see at Easter. For my Jewish friends, I'm like, you have some friends that you only see at the high holidays. It's similar for Ramadan. There's some Muslims that you only see during Ramadan. And it's like, oh, you're reconnecting. So Ramadan is that kind of important. It's like the highest time of the year for Muslims. And it's really a way for us to reconnect every year.
So it's a joyful time.
Yes, it's a joyful holiday. It's something to be celebrated. So it's a celebration and very community oriented. So right now with COVID, that has really affected us because during Ramadan, it's like the lack of sleep is expected because you are on the go for so long and you're like fasting all day, and then you break your fast, and then you're going to different events at night, and then you're doing extra prayers at night. And because we live here in the US and everything doesn't shut down for Ramadan, then we're going back to our regular jobs. So it's like we're doing all of this stuff at night, but still are really doing our regular 9 to 5 the rest of the time. So it is the time of year that we're like really like going all out for a month. And then a lot of people crash afterwards, like, okay, the month is over.
So I know that it changed. So Ramadan's coming up. So first of all, when is it coming right now?
Okay, so let's step back of why we don't know exactly when it is.
Okay, yeah.
Because some people are like, oh, I saw it on my calendar that I got from Staples, and it says this date. Ramadan is the Islamic calendar is a lunar calendar. So it's based on the sighting of the moon. And so every year, some people are like, we'll just do it by mathematical calculations. This is when it's supposed to start. Some Muslims say, unless someone in my community actually sees the new moon, sees the crescent moon starting, we won't start fasting. So usually that means that there are a few days that Muslims might start fasting. So right now, if you look at the calendar, most calendars will say Ramadan is starting on April 13th. So officially starts the night of the 12th, but the first day of fasting will be the 13th. I've seen some things today that people are like, well, the chances of actually seeing it aren't great, so we probably won't be starting until the 14th. So usually people will start within 2 days of each other. So right now it's looking like Tuesday or Wednesday of next week. The majority of people will start. So
is that like globally in the sense that in terms of like not necessarily having a fixed day, like actually seeing the crescent moon?
Well, so it's because, there are Muslims all over the world. So there's some people who, we live here in the DC area who are like, if the people in Saudi Arabia start today, we're starting today. Okay. So there's some people who are like that. There's some people are like, I don't care what they saw over in Saudi Arabia. If nobody on the East Coast of the United States has seen it, or even the West Coast, and nobody in the United States has seen it, we're not fasting until someone in the United States has seen it. So that's why it's always, not the same. So you'll have certain communities that are like, we go straight by mathematical calculation. This is when we're starting. A lot of people start that day. Usually that means because everybody doesn't start that day, that we may not end on the same day because the month is 29 or 30 days. But as long as you start on a day apart, you can either fast 29 or 30 days.
Okay. So how does that impact celebration? Well, I have so much I want to talk about. So I don't want to like jump to the end of the book here, but I know that there's celebrations and I want to talk about the celebrations, but just going back to the date, how does the uncertainty of date impact, planning for celebrations?
Well, so I think of it as a celebration because I'm a kid at heart and my niece is 7.5, that every night for Muslims is a celebration because you have fasted another day. So usually that means that the community that you are in, you usually start fasting with your community so that every night when you're breaking the fast, there's someone to break fast with, someone who is celebrating with you the end of the day of fasting. So usually different communities here in the DC area start on different days, but usually you start with the rest of the people in your community so that the first day of fasting is ended. And this year, like last year, it'll be a lot of drive-through iftars. So you will drive up to the masjid, you'll pop your trunk, they'll put food in your trunk, food and water in your trunk, and then you'll go home and actually have it at home. When it's not COVID, it is a time for everyone to come to the masjid to, break fast together, to pray together. Kids are having fun and hanging out. Then there's nightly prayers, and then people are going home. So it could usually last easily from the time the sun goes down to 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, every night during Ramadan.
So if I understand correctly, the fasting is done to like further center your connection to God. Is that the idea?
Yes, you're reconnecting with the Holy Book. Like reconnecting with the starting point of Islam being the revelation of Quran that started in the month of Ramadan. So it's a reconnection time. So during Ramadan, it's not just fasting. People are like, oh, you guys are fasting. We're also encouraged to do extra prayers, to read 1/30th of the Quran per day. So some days it's not as much as others, but 1/30th of the Quran per day to do the reconnection. Mm-hmm. And so do more charitable deeds. There's some Muslims who only give charity during Ramadan because you get extra points, like get extra things for doing it during Ramadan. So it's like donations, getting kids involved because, all kids can't start fasting right away. And that's a question that comes up all the time is what age do kids start fasting? And I always tell people, the adults, your child. you know what your child is capable of doing. So you know if your child is ready to start fasting. Most kids don't really start fasting every day until they reach puberty. There are kids who start younger. There are kids who start at 7, 8. But if you know your child can't go without an afternoon snack, cannot go without lunch in the middle of the day, it's not this child needs to fast, because we don't want people falling out from fasting. So it's a reconnection, and it's a separation from food. But at the same time, we need to be very aware that children, like, you can't say, well, you're 5 now, it's time to fast, where you know the child, will have low blood sugar and fall out if they don't eat every 5 hours. Because usually this time of year is not bad, but you're still fasting a good 12, 13 hours. And fasting from everything. So no water.
Well, okay, so you're getting, because it's sun up to sundown.
So it is dawn.
Okay. Oh, okay.
So
So like the crack of dawn. Right. Okay.
Yeah. So it's before sun. It's about an hour and a half before sunrise. So it's dawn to sunset.
Okay.
So it's a little longer. So people usually say, oh, sun up to sundown. It's not quite right. Think of it as dawn to sunset. So it's really probably about an hour. If I'm looking at the times now, it's probably an hour before sunrise right now.
And no water.
No water.
Okay.
So it is
nothing.
a complete fast. So talking about no water, if you are pregnant, breastfeeding, a diabetic, hypoglycemic, a cancer survivor who has to eat regular meals, like you are allowed to not fast. It is not you need to fast after you're over, you've reached puberty. It's like, if you have a medical reason why you cannot fast, that is acceptable. There are other things you can do in light of not fasting. So you can feed the hungry. You can sponsor an iftar to feed fasting people, because you get blessings for feeding people who have been fasting. So you can get some of the blessings of Ramadan without actually having to fast. But sometimes people are like, well, I want to fast during Ramadan, but I'm still breastfeeding. If you can't keep up your milk production by fasting all day, we're not going to starve the baby because you decided to fast. So it's really, there's the elderly. Once you get past a certain age, you don't have to fast. And it's really depending on, your personal health status. Some people stop at 60. Some people are still fasting at 85 because they have no health issues. Right. So, those are all taken into account when people are fasting.
And so I know you also mentioned, I do know that there maybe is a prop here too, that you brought something to show us, and it's to do a celebration. And so you have something for your niece, I think, right? So
this year, because we're so close to Easter, I was able to get her a basket because she's a soccer fan, and I put together a Ramadan basket for her. Like, Ramadan's coming, Ramadan's almost here. Here's a basket of goodies. So every year, and this is the great part about living in the time we're living at now, because I remember as a little kid hiding that I was fasting Ramadan. Nobody knew what I was doing. I had to take off special days from school. Now there's a bunch of, like, books that you can order off of Amazon. So this is a Somali boy practicing, Ramadan at school in Minnesota, I want to say. This is a little girl who's about the same age as my niece on her first year trying to fast. This one is another one. All these books are, you can get, most of them you can get at your local library. So I felt that, because we were doing things with the library, so you could probably get this one at the library. And then she loves dinosaurs. So I got her a dinosaur magazine, and she loves word searches. So I found some Ramadan word searches, and I just put it all together so that she's excited and like, Ramadan's coming. She's in the 2nd grade, and really, amazingly enough, she has told her class on the countdown. She's been counting down for the last 30 days. So she's been like, 7 more days till Ramadan. It's 5 more days. So like, she keeps on telling them. They're like, really? So I'm sure people in her class are like, my child keeps on talking about Ramadan. Why do they know so much? But it's really because we want children to be excited, because it's the time thing that we don't celebrate Christmas. We don't have Hanukkah near the New Year. So when kids are like saying, oh my goodness, even last weekend with Easter and people getting Easter baskets, we don't celebrate that. So we want kids to be excited about our holiday as well. So it's really, the decorations have started. We have books for her, and like, oh yeah, you have books about Ramadan. You can read about Ramadan. And in Prince George's County, I actually printed off the calendar yesterday. I believe this is the first year, it might be the second, but Ramadan is listed on the school calendar, the start of Ramadan, the end of Ramadan, and Eid al-Fitr, which is the celebration at the end of Ramadan, is actually a holiday. And that's huge for Muslim children, that is huge that your celebration is acknowledged by other people so that other people can be like, oh, you have a holiday? And so it's not a, I was never going to get perfect attendance because I just wasn't. But there were people, Muslim children, who never could get perfect attendance because they always were missing school for Muslim holidays. So the fact that PG County Public Schools now has off for Eid, it's so exciting for Muslim children. It's a great time to be like, oh yeah, I'm a Muslim, and just really talking about what Ramadan is, because so many people don't have any idea. So many people are like, oh, I think I know about it. Some people fast. I think they only do it overseas, and it's not something that's just done overseas. It's something that's done right here in the United States, right here in PG County. There's several masjids, and there's so many Muslim children who are getting ready. They're getting excited, like Ramadan's coming. What's going to happen? What are we going to do this year? So it's really important for us to give them a sense of celebration of our holidays.
Yeah, I think for me, so as a non-Muslim person, how great it is for me to learn, and also like about, because it's my community, so my people in my community, my friends, our future friends, and to be like just how rich, knowledge about other traditions are for like a non-Muslim like myself, where it's like, wow, that's so interesting, and it's so rich and deep, and and so much that I didn't know. And so first, I'm just so grateful for this. And I have like many questions, and I want to try to make sure that for people who are listening that they're kind of linear. So I'm going to try here because I'm all over with this. But you mentioned Eid. So what is that? What is the holiday at the end of Ramadan?
So it's called Eid al-Fitr. It's the celebration at the end of Eid. There's a prayer in the morning, but usually you're like going out for breakfast because remember, you've been fasting for 30 days. So all of a sudden you can eat during daylight. So you're like going to IHOP or whatever place is open for breakfast. Kids are getting their toys. So their gifts. It's really a time to meet with your family. In COVID, it has been really hard because Eid used to be a time where you would go and visit your fellow family members and take gifts, similar to think about Christmas morning when you're bringing gifts, and people, different families have different traditions of what they do on Eid. And Eid is a 3-day celebration. Most of the celebrating is the first day, but people spend so much time like, Eid Mubarak, because during Ramadan, we say Ramadan Mubarak, which is Ramadan blessing. But Eid comes and you're like, Eid Mubarak. You're like, yes, we made it. It's so exciting. So it is a celebration that we've been counting down to Ramadan, but once Ramadan starts, you count down to Eid. So I have another prop for that. So this is a Ramadan calendar. So on the calendar, we have this little crescent because, everything is a crescent moon. And every day, my niece just moves it. And so it gets all the way down to the bottom and it says Eid. Okay. So every day she's keeping track of how many days are left on the calendar. And these things, a lot of people have these kind of decorations at the house. Some people are much fancier than me, and they do like homemade. They create their own calendar that their kids put up there on the wall. And they're just like, they have little things every day, little sayings, a good deed to do for the day. So since my niece is 7, we would probably put a little slip of paper of something like smile at all your friends today, do your chores without being asked, set the table, like little good deeds to do. Like a couple of days, it definitely will be go through all your toys that you haven't played with in the last year, because we're going to be donating them to other children in order for you to get new toys. So that'll be several days of the 29. It's probably 5 days of, did you go through all your toys? Did you go through every single one of them? So, just good deeds for them to really think about other people during Ramadan, because it's really important to think about the charity that everybody's not going to get great gifts at the end of Ramadan. So a lot of the masjids, which is our holy places, a lot of people call it mosque, but mosque is really a French word. Masjid is the Arabic word, give out toys. So there'll be some masjids that you will go do a drive-through Eid, and they'll put a toy in the back of your car saying, oh, girl or boy, what age range, we'll put a toy back there. And groups like Islamic Relief do a lot of toys during Ramadan. Like they collect toys from different communities and then they distribute it at the end of the month.
So I just want to, sorry, I want to just clarify. So I should not, or I should work to say, can you say it for me again? Masjid?
Masjid. Yeah, masjid instead of mosque. I mean,
Okay.
mosque is fine if everybody knows that. But, you know, when you hear Muslims talk about it, people are like, what's a masjid? It's like, well, you say mosque, but we say masjid. So usually they're, you know, unless they're called Islamic centers, a lot of them are called masjid something, you know. I used to live in Atlanta. It was the Atlanta masjid, you know, like, so usually have, you know, I want to say PGMA. I think that actually stands for Prince George's Muslim Association, but they're all masjids, places where Muslims congregate to make prayer.
So is there, so for those of us who are not Muslim, how can we support? How can we be better friends and citizens and neighbors?
Okay, so I'm okay with you saying Happy Ramadan. I do not feel the need for you to say Ramadan Mubarak. Saying Happy Ramadan. I have a friend who went to school with a lot of Muslims years ago, and I can still remember when we first started working together, and she said Happy Ramadan. I'm like, you know about Ramadan? She's like, yeah, I went to school with a bunch of Muslims. And so saying Happy Ramadan is great. Acknowledging that there might be, you know, like you guys talk about, we all talk about the afternoon slump. It might be more draining for Muslims. So just asking Muslim colleagues, do you want us to schedule meetings in the morning instead of the afternoon? Because, you know, by late afternoon, I mean, especially the first few days, most of us who live here in the United States, we drink a lot of caffeine. So you have a huge caffeine withdrawal headache the first couple of days of Ramadan. So really being cognizant that, you know, do we need to switch around the schedule? Do we have, you know, like our staff meeting is always 1 to 2 on Fridays, but during Ramadan, I really want to be able to go to the masjid for Jummah services, or even do Jummah services online. You know, just asking like, what could we do to make it easier for you to fast? So small changes. So we're not saying, don't come to work at all, you know, switch my schedule so you're working nighttime, but just little things like, what time are you freshest? Because I know you're fasting. You know, I know that you can't drink any water. If you have to give this presentation, is it best for you to do it at 10 o'clock in the morning where you're still like, okay, you know, I start fasting at 5:30, so I'm still good. The better than, you know, say at 5:30 when you're just like, I'm on fumes. I'm just trying to get to, and, you know, a lot of Muslims take that late afternoon nap too, just to get to the end of the day. So just asking, you know, saying, oh, happy Ramadan. What can I do? You know, what can I do? And for kids to just ask their Muslim friends, like, tell me about Ramadan, because most little kids would be so happy to share. They have plenty of books. Most, you know, Curious George has a Ramadan book. You know, my niece from the time she was in pre-K would tell everybody about it. She would tell her whole class. She was like, do you want me to present on it? So it's really the kind of thing that children are so excited, and just asking like, tell me more about Ramadan instead of making assumptions, because so many people are like, oh, I know about Ramadan. I'm not going to ask. I'm not going to say anything. But we want you to acknowledge the holiday because it's a very big deal for us.
That's good to know, because I'm sure that there are some people, and maybe even some people listening, who have that kind of like awkwardness, you know, don't want to say the wrong thing, and is happy Ramadan rude, or, you know, so that's very helpful.
No, happy Ramadan is fine. I mean, some people are like, oh, well, can they say, you know, Ramadan Mubarak is Ramadan blessings? But I mean, I'm a person that if you don't know Arabic, don't try to be like, oh, you know, Ramadan Kareem. And you're like, is it Kareem or Karen? It's easier to just say happy Ramadan, and they'll be like, oh, thank you. That should be the response that you get from a Muslim who's fasting is, oh, thank you. Because during Ramadan, we're just not fasting from food. We're trying to fast from all of the bad things we do during the year. So I'm a person who have road rage issues. So during Ramadan, I'm trying not to yell at the other drivers. I'm trying to be, you're just trying to reconnect and be a better person all around with good deeds. You're not trying to be mean to other people. So for kids, you're trying not to fight with other people. And think about how hard that is fasting, because sometimes you're hungry and angry.
Right.
You're really trying to work on yourself and really recenter yourself during Ramadan. So it's really important just to, okay, thank you. I don't assume that everybody's being mean to me because they don't say Ramadan Mubarak. I'm like, happy Ramadan. I was like, thank you so much. I'm enjoying it. But it's not to be, some people are like, well, can you still come to lunch? Most adults, once they hit a certain age, have been to so many lunch meetings during Ramadan that doesn't bother them. So many adults are feeding children who aren't fasting. So being around food is not horrible. Some people are like, oh, can I eat in front of you? I mean, that's something to ask. I'm at the stage now where I'm like, you can eat in front of me because like I've been fasting for so many years that, it doesn't bother me. But young kids, their first year fasting, it might be hard for them. I can still remember my first year fasting. I told my teacher I was fasting, and he was like, well, do you want to go to the lunchroom? I said, I'd rather not. He was like, you could stay. And, back then when you used to get the chalkboard and the erasers that had like the young kids don't know what I'm talking about, but the chalkboard, he let me clean the chalkboard.
Young kids are missing out. I mean,
that used to be so much fun. And, remember everybody used to like fight over who was going to do it. Mm-hmm. And he let me stay, in the classroom because he knew I was fasting. And so things like that, as for a new faster, that's hard. So for even, new Muslims, it could be hard to be around people who, are eating when you're fasting for the first time because you're like, oh my gosh, they're eating exactly what I want. But I will tell you a secret that I have is that if I see somebody eating something that I really like, I'm like, it's on my list of things to eat when I break my fast.
I was just thinking that. Can you be like, okay. Yeah.
I'm like, that's on my list. I'm like, I'm going to get a chocolate bar. And so some days it'll be like, what do you want for dinner? I was like, well, I saw somebody with this earlier. That's exactly what I want. So it really, but some people it doesn't bother them. Some people have very cultural things that they eat every single Ramadan, every single day during Ramadan. The only thing that probably crosses ethnicities, crosses the world is that most people break the fast with a date because Prophet Muhammad broke the fast with a date. And dates are such a great, I don't think they're officially superfoods, but eating a date doesn't spike your blood sugar as fast as other things. It's like a slow rise. So people do dates in water, dates in Gatorade if people get up their electrolyte. Some people do a lot of fruit, something that's like a slow, like usually you don't break your fast with a candy bar because that shot of chocolate will be way too much to, for someone on an empty stomach. So it's really something small date to break your fast, a thing of water, to really start your body moving because your body's like, wait a second, it's been hours since you do anything. Making the prayer and then eating dinner.
So I've been fortunate enough to have been invited to an iftar, and I'm wondering if you can talk about that tradition, and is it every night, and how do people decide who to invite and all of that? If you can tell us about that.
Yes. So every day the morning meal is called sahur. So because it is at dawn and you are at your own home, most of the time sahur is just you and your immediate family, or just you if you live by yourself. But iftar is at night. That's when you break the fast. And so it is such a blessing to feed fellow fasters. So usually people are like, oh, they have different series of friends that they invite. Some people are like, we'll go to my family tonight, your family another night. There's some people who eat iftar meals at the masjid, at different masjids throughout the DC area entire month. Some people are like, I am not cooking. We will find a place to get food. And really during Ramadan, there's a place for Muslims to get food at iftar around this area. So, I mean, it used to be a lot of the embassies would have iftars that you had to be invited to. Some of the federal agencies would have iftars. So you're always like, okay, where is tonight's iftar? Is that the kind of food I like? I mean, there's been some interfaith work. I know a synagogue that hosted an iftar for Muslims one year, and they were like, oh, what can we have? We're kosher. And I was like, Muslims eat fish? If you want to do, kosher and have, salmon, and they had a whole spread for an iftar. And so many people are like, wow, we're going to a synagogue? It was like, they invited us and they are feeding Muslims at the end of the day for iftar. So iftars are really parties. Like my niece, when she was like 3, had these silver shoes that she swore she had to wear every night to go to her iftar party. And she was like, where are we going for our iftar party? So for little kids, it's such a social time. And so that's what's making it so hard during COVID, is that it's not the same doing it on Zoom. It's just not the same. So it's really important that people enjoy the time and really talk about what Ramadan means to family, and really kind of be like, okay, this is what I'm going to do during Ramadan to celebrate. And, I'm celebrating with my family. I'm celebrating with close friends. But for a lot of single Muslims last year was really hard. And it'll be hard this year too, of it's such a community time, and it's a time you look forward to, so that all of a sudden be like, wait a second, we can't do that. It's like, it's very distressing, because you look forward to celebrating.
That seems like a big piece, right? Is the community aspect, family aspect.
The family aspect, the reconnecting, the nightly prayers. Yes, you can do night prayers at your house, but doing communal night prayers at the masjid, I mean, there's just something that you have to experience it, that you get a nice warm feeling after doing it, that you're just like, this is Ramadan.
So I didn't know until just now that, in fact, so I could make an iftar, invite someone over for iftar to my house. So I've been like waiting for someone to invite me over. So this is actually so wonderful, because this is another way that, I mean, I'm not recognizing that my Muslim friends may have other plans, but that's something that would be a reasonable thing for someone in the community to do, or for an organization to do, to do that and invite people.
And like communities do it, like if you live in a subdivision that has, like a community center in the subdivision, and there's some Muslim families, some Muslim families might say, we're having iftar, and just inviting the neighbors to come experience an iftar with you. But it is, when people invite me to iftar, someone was like, oh, let me see, what's your date? And really seriously, the dates easily get up early. So it's like, okay, especially the weekends when you have kids who are in school. So it's like, okay, if you want a weekend during Ramadan, you better put it on the schedule early, because so many people, are like, oh, I want to have my iftar meal. I want everybody to come. And, if you don't get on the schedule early enough, because it's really hard to go to multiple iftars in a night. It's usually one main iftar meal that you're going to go to.
Right. So, and someone has asked, and I have this question too, but I see that someone has asked it, which is, so if you're invited to an iftar, and let's take it from the spectrum, a non-Muslim person is invited to an iftar, what should they do? What should they expect? What should they bring?
They don't have to bring anything.
Okay.
And it's really, you should expect to get there on time. So this is for people who are always late. This is the time to get there early. If they say that they're breaking fast at 6:21, they're breaking fast at 6:21. It's not a thing to get there late. So if you want to have a full experience, get there before they say fast breaking time is. Usually they'll have a little something beforehand, or if nothing else, people are standing around helping the person who's hosting at the last minute. But one thing Muslims are very clear on during Ramadan, they break the fast on time. So if it says 6:21 is when that prayer comes in, 6:21 is when they break the fast. So if you're a person who's always late and shows up at 7 o'clock, you're gonna be like, is the food almost gone? Yes, because we started eating it. Like we broke the fast, we had prayer, which takes, breaking fast might take 5-10 minutes. Prayer might take another 5, but after that, people are, eating. So if you're invited, you're going for the experience. It's almost like a dinner party, but it is during Ramadan.
So how is Ramadan in general, if you're able to speak to this, how do we see Ramadan in the United States versus other places in the world?
So it's interesting. When you're in a non-Muslim country, it's totally different than being in a Muslim country. So in a Muslim country, everybody's celebrating. It's similar to here, where everybody knows that Black Friday is the day after Thanksgiving. Everybody knows that there's all those holiday parties. Nobody schedules a night meeting for December 24th, because everybody knows it's Christmas Eve. That's similar to how in Muslim countries Ramadan is. Nothing big is scheduled during Ramadan. There are no company retreats during Ramadan. A lot of countries, depending on the country, some countries basically shut down. Some countries are similar to Europe in the last 3 weeks of August when everybody goes on vacation. In some Muslim countries, the whole country kind of slows down during the day. You can't find anybody, but people are up all night celebrating, visiting family, and sleeping all day. So it is different in a Muslim country compared to here in the US. Yes, we're still trying to do some of those. We're up at night praying, we're visiting people, but some Muslims may take off the last 10 days of Ramadan to just be really into it, but most of them will only take off for Eid at the end of Ramadan. So it is different. And it's very cultural too. So every culture celebrates Ramadan differently, even an iftar. So I have a funny story about this. one of the people who work with me, he's from Egypt. And his first year, he married a woman from Bangladesh. And so his first year, his first iftar, first Ramadan as a married couple, they fasted all day together. They go to break fast. And he's like, where's the soup? And she's like, what soup? And a lot of Arab cultures, especially in Egypt, they break the fast after the dates and the water and stuff like that. Their first course is like a lentil soup. They want something bland in their stomach first. She's from Bangladesh. They have, looks like samosas that are very spicy. That's what they eat first. And so she's like,
that's a big difference.
Oh, yeah. She was like, oh, here's this. And so he's like, my mouth's on fire. And I'm like, what are you trying to kill me? We just got married. But it was really a different cultures celebrate differently. So it could totally be, depending on the cultural background of the person who's breaking fast that you're at the iftar house. It could be little things like most people will have dates, but I grew up in a community that did dates with a little sliver of like cheddar cheese. So the salty with the sweet. Some people do dates with cream cheese. Some people do dates with chopped nuts. It's really, they're all dates, but there could be something added to the dates. Some people do crackers like the saltines, so something that you would eat if you had an upset stomach. Some people do saltines. So it really depends on the background of the person, what they consider traditional iftar food. So also it's like, okay, well, it's time to break fast. What's the traditional food? And I'm like, there it goes. Right. Chicken, rice, and a vegetable. I'm not the biggest fan of rice. I know there are Muslims out there that say, oh, she said, I'm not the biggest fan of rice. I'm like, oh, gotta eat chicken and rice again. But it's chicken done different ways. So it depends on the community. If it's a curry chicken, if it's mild, if it's like a tandoori chicken. Mm-hmm. So it's usually some kind of protein, most of the time rice, some people's bread, and some, vegetable or something like that. Something it's not a simple meal because some people go all out. So I used to have a friend who was a chef and he was a non-Muslim, but he loved Ramadan. He was like, when are you having your event? And I'm like, why are you the only person talking about Ramadan, 2 months in advance? He was like, well, I need to put the date on my calendar and we need to put together a menu. And people would come to my house with takeout containers because they knew he would make so much extra food. And people are like, wow, you have all this food. But he was always so excited about Ramadan. And that's what I always loved about him. He was such a great friend, was that he was excited about feeding the Muslims because he was like, I know that they will be so grateful for the meal and that they're going to be like, can I take some home? And he would have to-go containers. And for a chef, seeing people enjoying your food is like something real. So he would look forward to it. And so many people are like, Rama, when's your iftar? I'm not going to schedule mine. I don't schedule mine around Rama's iftar. And, because everybody knew that I was going to have a huge spread. But that's not normal. Like everybody doesn't have huge spreads. A lot of people have, like something small, but something that's very like what their community does. And so, I went to the Philippines and there's a very strong Muslim population in Mindanao that's been historically there for centuries. And they had stuff and they were like, oh, enjoy this. And I'm like, what is that? Okay, I'm going to try it once. But, for everyone, they were like, y'all don't eat this? I'm like, my community in the US does not eat what you guys eat. So cultural differences really come in during Ramadan. It's really a way to really experience the fact that Muslims are not a monolith. I think so many people think that all Muslims are Arab. That is not true. Most Muslims are not Arab. So there are so many different rich traditions. It really depends on, where your ancestry is from and how you really celebrate Ramadan. So, all Muslims celebrate slightly differently. The things that are the same are the month, the dates, the fasting itself.
So speaking of different cultures, I know that you also have a picture that I'm hoping Nick can put up of a wreath, right? We have a wreath. So can you talk about this? Hopefully, he's going to put it up in just a moment.
I'm African American, and my parents converted to Islam before I was born. And my community they started out in the Nation of Islam. They came to Sunni Islam in the 70s. And so we have really created African American Muslim traditions that are different from traditions of African Americans. So this is kente cloth wreath that we're going to put up on our door, and in the middle it says Ramadan Mubarak. But people who are from Indonesia would be like, that's not what I would put up, like, or if you're from Arab country, you're like, that's not my tradition. And even from African countries, they could be like, oh, I would never mix those two because those are from two different countries in Africa who don't get along. But as an African American, we kind of take the entire continent. So we kind of bring together our own traditions. So having something like this is our wreath that, like we put up on our door to celebrate being African American Muslims. And so, other Muslims will be like, oh, I put up a crescent. I mean, it's the same thing that some Muslims put up. It's like a crescent shaped tree, similar to a Christmas tree, but it's shaped like a crescent moon. Some people put those up for their kids to hang ornaments on. So it's really based on the traditions that you grew up in.
So, excuse me, I'm sorry. I just want to go back to the iftar again, because apparently I'm inviting everybody over to my house, just FYI. So I know you said, that a typical, and I think you've answered this, but I just want to be clear. If I'm having people over, and I know you mentioned that a lot of times people will have like a chicken, rice, vegetable. Mm-hmm. Could I make could I make food? Like, could I make falafels? It's my favorite thing to make. Yeah. Or so should really I try to make? Okay.
Depends on your Muslim friends, really. Okay. So it would be nice to have dates, but if you don't have dates, you have like cut up fruit tray. That's fine. Mm-hmm. It's just something like. Some Muslims are strictly halal, so they only eat halal foods. So that would really, talk about your beef, chicken, lamb, those kind of things. But there's not a halal standard for, say, fish. So if you, do fish or a vegetarian meal, as long as there's no pork or pork byproducts, you're usually safe. But I would usually ask the Muslims that, are your friends, like, oh, are you strictly halal? For us in the DC area, I know some people are like, oh, I go to a halal food truck. There's a bunch of halal food trucks in downtown DC that have a lot of people, and most of those people are not Muslims. So a lot of people know what halal is nowadays. Growing up, I used to say halal, and they'd be like, what? I'm like, it's the Muslim version of kosher. So it's the way that the animal is sacrificed for you to eat. Mm-hmm. So it's really a matter of, are you strictly halal or not? If they're not strictly halal, it's, you can just give them anything that's not pork. So you can be like, oh, I have this special beef dish that I'm doing for you. And then it would be something that I would ask, like, are you a not spicy person? Because some people just really, if you think about it, during Ramadan, some people are like, ooh, I can't do anything spicy. But certain cultures, I have very good friends who are Pakistani. I went to their wedding and I was like, is that just a layer of peppers on top? And it was just, they're like, ooh, if you don't like spicy, don't touch that. So for them, that's what they expect. Like, that's what they love is the spicy. For me, I'm like, ooh, no spicy. They're like, oh, just add some yogurt. Yogurt was not sufficient to get rid of the spice. So
a lot more yogurt. Right.
Yeah, so it's really a matter of asking your friends, like, do you have any dietary restrictions? Is there anything that you really don't want to see? Some people are like, during Ramadan, I never eat pasta because it's like short. It doesn't stay with you very long. And that's another thing that I forgot to mention for sahur in the morning. So some people treat sahur, that morning meal. Some people eat breakfast foods and some people eat dinner foods, depending on just how they feel in their culture. Like, so that usually it's breakfast or dinner foods. I'm a person who doesn't necessarily love breakfast foods. And I know I'll be thinking about the leftover sandwich from last night. So I might eat that sandwich in the morning. But some people are like, I do overnight oats. I wake up, I have my oatmeal. That's what I have every day for iftar. For sahur, for that morning meal. But people are strongly encouraged to not forget the blessings of sahur and get up for it. Because some people I know will roll awake 2-3 minutes before that prayer comes in, drink a bottle of water and be like, I'll be okay all day. And you're like, yeah. You should. So we usually encourage, especially people who are fasting for the first time, encourage people to take advantage of sahur and actually wake up and eat that meal so that you can have something in your stomach.
So I have a question that's a little bit, it's to do with Ramadan. It's a little bit away, which is just to do with this time that we're in. It's the time of COVID, and it's also the time of this massive vaccination rollout. Mm-hmm. So what are the implications of that for people during Ramadan?
Okay, so I'm not a doctor, but I have been on a lot of COVID calls, and we're part of a coalition. And Karama actually signed on to a letter that was released by the National Muslim Coalition, or maybe Muslim Doctors Coalition, who came up with, they really were supported by scholars and doctors that getting vaccinated does not break your fast. I think that that's what a lot of Muslims have a concern, that somehow putting anything in your body during the day breaks your fast. And the scholars have already, the Fiqh Council of North America, the Islamic Society of North America, and I believe ICNA have all come out with statements that to get a vaccine does not eliminate your fast. Because some people are like, I'll just wait until Ramadan's over because I don't want to get, any kind of vaccination when it's available to you. For Muslims, we are very big on the benefit for the community. And for us, getting vaccinated is very important. It is a very important part of community building. We want to be able to get back to the point where we can go to the masjid. We want to get back to the point that, I'm not sure, for people who've never been to the masjid, you might not have seen this, but men shake hands, they give the bro hug. Muslim women kiss each other cheek to cheek. And we do so much close interaction that we have missed. And for me, especially, I'm like, I miss being able to hug people. We hug all the time. We are hugging people. So the fact that we can't do it during COVID has been really trying. And so we are encouraging people that when you have the availability to get the shot, we'll actually I'm going to send it out on the Karama Facebook page. And I'll put up the statement. But getting the shot, the first shot, the second shot, it does not matter. That does not nullify your fast. If you get sick from the shot, we all know that if you get sick during Ramadan, you can make those days up. So Ramadan should not be your excuse you use for not getting the COVID shot. And I want to encourage, I was blessed that my first shot was exactly 4 weeks from this Monday. So I will get my second shot on the 12th. So I will get my shot right before Ramadan starts. But that was just a blessing. That was not planned. But, I'm like, what? If I get sick and miss the first couple of days around, that's okay, because I'm doing this for the greater good.
I just want to say, if anybody is watching and they have any questions, they'd like to type them into the chat, whether you're watching on Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube. Our friend Nick from the library will make sure that we get them and try to get to them and answer them before we're out of time. There is one already that is to do with, and I think Nick's actually going to put some on the screen. And here we go. There we go. We got one. What do you take with you if you're invited for an iftar?
You don't have to bring anything. You really don't have to bring it, because for Muslims, we feel that we get blessings for feeding people, especially feeding people who are, have been fasting all day. So when people would come to my house and when I invite people over, I don't want them to bring anything. I'm like, are you trying to take some of my blessings? I want to get that blessing from feeding you. So you don't have to bring anything over. If you really feel the need to bring something, you can bring a dessert, but just keep in mind that everybody doesn't really eat dessert sometimes during Ramadan, because people's stomachs our eyes are bigger than our stomachs. So all day I've been planning, I'm like, oh, I'm going to get that cheesesteak, and then I'm going to have chips, then I'm going to have this, and this. And I get halfway through my cheesesteak and be like, So it really depends on, don't feel bad if people don't eat the dessert you bring. And then some people, when they invite you over to an iftar, have a special dessert that is cultural that they like to share with you. So don't really feel the need to bring anything. I know some people are like, I always take something to. You don't have to. You literally don't have to bring anything with you.
Could that be? So it sounds like it really maybe the the more appropriate thing is to not bring something in that case in terms of a food item.
Yeah, you can always ask. You're like, can I bring? But most of the time, no, don't bring anything. Like people be like, no,
right.
Because we feel the need that we are like doing this as something that we're getting a special blessing for during Ramadan.
So for somebody who really just was like, I cannot go to someone's house without bringing something, like, can they bring flowers? Like, is there? I mean, that kind of thing, or
they can. Yeah. So the thing is, you can bring, if you have a special bread, that you make and you're bringing to share, that's fine. You can bring something, but just know that it's not required, that you might be the only person who brings it. I see Allison's question. It really depends on your Muslim friend. And it is really an individual situation. I don't keep strictly halal. So, you don't have to especially go out and get kosher meat, but I'll eat kosher meat too. But there'll be, I have friends that they only eat halal. So they ask, even when they go to Muslim town, is this halal? If it's not halal, I'm not eating it. So it really is a very individual. It really depends on the person that you're inviting.
I think that's
tell them like, hey, I'm making this, special beef dish, but it is kosher. It's not halal, because they might ask. That's the kind of thing that they might ask while they're there.
I think that is a really good point too. That not everybody who's Muslim eats halal. That's not necessarily.
And there's no rhyme or reason on who does and who doesn't. So it's not even. Well, maybe it's because you're an African American Muslim that you don't. There will be plenty of Muslims from other places. From Saudi Arabia, people will come like, Allah has given us all this food in the world. The only thing he says we can't eat is pork. So I'm not limiting myself to, only halal. So it is very individual.
So we have another question here asking you to speak to the meaning of halal meat and zabiha.
Yes, zabiha, and the relationship between the two. They're really close, very similar. It's really the way that the animal was slaughtered and what is said. And zabiha is like a little level above. So halal is kind of much more generic. Zabiha is a little better. So some people like, not only do they not just eat halal, but they like, is it zabiha? And so that's really the relationship between the two. But really, halal is sufficient for most people. But it is a really personal decision. I want to stress that because I think too often, like in every other religion, we start getting this kind of litmus test of how Muslim are you? Do you only eat zabiha meat? Do you only eat halal meat? Are you a vegetarian? Are you a vegan? And I want to stress that as long as you feel it is your connection, because for Muslims, one of the best things about being a Muslim is that our direct connection to God. We don't have someone who is going to get we don't have to go to an imam and say, Imam, can you tell me what to do? And tell me, it's really your own prayer that you make. So it is, for most Muslims, when they sit down and eat, they say Bismillah, in the name of God, and then they start eating. It's not a long, Lord's Prayer or anything over the meal. Bismillah, and they start eating. So I'm, of the opinion that Bismillah, and as long as it's not pork, I can eat it. But that is a personal decision that I have made. I know plenty of Muslims that are my friends who are like, I can only eat halal meat. I can only eat zabiha meat. But it's really, to me, it's not a litmus test of how Muslim you are on whether or not you eat that or not. Because, I have Jewish friends who never eat kosher. I'm like, not only are you not eating kosher, but I'm pretty sure that's pork. But it's like, okay, that's between you and God. If you feel the need to do that, it's okay. So really, they are very close, but zabiha is a little better.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I'm just seeing if do we have any more questions, Nick? Oh. That's great. So is there anything, I know that we're getting a little bit close to time. And so, I could talk to you for a while. I'm expecting an invitation to my house for falafel at any time. But is there anything that we haven't covered that you would like to talk about or make sure that the audience is aware of?
I'm trying to think if there's anything that we have not brought up already. Oh, I know what it is. And we have said it a few times and we kind of have gone over it kind of. So the Islamic calendar is lunar. And I always get the question, okay, the Jewish calendar is lunar, but Passover and the high holidays are always around the same time. And Ramadan keeps on changing. Ramadan keeps on changing because we are not limited by the standard calendar of January to December. So we are constantly moving. So it is always about 11 days earlier. So sometimes I have people say, I thought I had a friend who was a Muslim, but back when they were fasting in December. And now you're fasting in April. Were they really fasting? Well, when did you know them? Was that 20 years ago? Because back in 2000, 2001, fasting was in December, but it moves up 11 days. So it really depends on what year you knew the person. And, so this year it's going to be starting mid-April. Last year was the end of April. Pretty soon, Ramadan will be right with Passover and Easter. You see, it's pretty close this year. So Easter was the 4th this year, and Ramadan starting on the probably 13th or 14th. So next year it'll be around the same time if Easter hits around the same time. So Ramadan keeps on moving. So at some point it'll be in December again with really short days. At some point in the future, God willing, it'll be in August again with those dog days of August and the super long days. So it just keeps on moving. So sometimes people are like, I had it down on my calendar last year that, I was going to invite people over on, May 15th. And now you're telling me that Ramadan's going to be over yes, Ramadan's going to be over by May 15th because it's starting earlier. So really the calendar moves about approximation about 11 days per year. And the other thing that people ask about, I said, what is Zabiha? Zabiha is just basically a little better than halal. So it's the way the animal was sacrificed. And so you might hear people say, I want Zabiha meat because it's the way the animal was sacrificed. So that's what I was saying, that it is a little better than halal. The other issue that comes up is how about people who live in Alaska when, some places in Alaska have all day and like no night. So usually there have been scholarship with Islamic scholars that they go to the closest place that has a 24-hour period and they go by that. So they don't necessarily go by where they're at because having to fast 22 out of 24 hours is just not acceptable. So it really is places like that when it's always dark and it never becomes light. So they go to the closest community to them geographically and use their time.
I think that we're almost out of time, but I do see one more question, which is, what about prayers? You mentioned 5 minutes, but like gratitude prayers.
Oh, no. So I would invite you to, if you don't have a Muslim friend, to make a Muslim friend and ask them about prayers. Muslims pray 5 times a day. Each prayer has prostrations. We always say it only takes about 5 minutes, and you shouldn't miss any because it only takes about 5 minutes. Some of them can be longer, but say the morning prayer is only 2 prostrations. They're called 2 rakats. And so that's probably the fastest one. And so Al-Fatiha is the opening chapter of the Quran. We say that every time we make prayer, Al-Fatiha. But you can then say a short chapter. So most of the time we teach children some really short ones so they can make prayer. And so it's very regimented. Prayers have all these steps. So it's really learning, like you can actually Google it and say Muslim prayers, how is it done? And it can show you the different prostrations that you have to make. But it only takes about 5 minutes, because I think some people have this idea that Muslims stay in prayer for like 30 minutes and I'm going to be starving by the time it's over. All said and done, it's between 5 and 7 minutes. I usually say 5. So it is not just a gratitude prayer, but it's a prayer that we have been obligated to say 5 prayers a day. So our first one is 2 rakats, the 2 middle ones. So there's one at like high noon, which is, so the morning one is Fajr prayer. Then Dhuhr prayer is like high noon, and that's 4 prostrations. Then Asr prayer, which is like late afternoon, again, 4 prostrations. Maghrib is the one that we do when we break the fast. That's 3 prostrations. And then there's one about an hour and a half, 1 hour and a half after Maghrib, the evening night prayer, and that's 4. So that's 4 and 4, 12, 15, 17 prostrations altogether for the day.
So this has been, I'm just so sorry that because we are out of time. And I do have to, so first of all, I want to thank you so much for coming and being with us again as Nick said, for your 3rd time. You've just been a wonderful guest. And this has been fascinating to me. And I hope that we can connect again and keep talking, because there's so much that you bring that I'm personally fascinated in, and I think is also great for our wider community. So thank you so much. And I want to bring Nick up. I know he's going to give some brief closing remarks, but I also really want to thank the library system for making this community conversation space available to us. It's just such an honor to be able to share the space with you. So thank you very much to the Prince George's County Memorial Library System and to Nick.
Totally.
Thank you.
Thank you both. This is really fascinating. I know it's something special for someone from a community being willing to kind of answer basic questions for those of us who are on the outside. And that takes a lot of grace to be comfortable doing that. So we really appreciate you being willing to help bring others of us along so that we can be better neighbors and friends. So this has been really wonderful. We are grateful to the Human Relations Commission, also to Rahmah for the conversation, of course, and also for the ongoing Women in Faith Diverse Voices Speak series. Before we go, I just want to give a plug for a few things. First off, if you do not have a Prince George's County Memorial Library System library card, you are missing out on the best darn ebook, e-audiobook collection in the DMV. And I know I'm biased, but it is true. We have our own collection. Montgomery County decided to follow suit recently. Everyone else in Maryland is on the state consortium. We have the shortest wait times on the popular titles. We also have a much more awesome, inclusive, eclectic collection than everyone else, I think. So, and the other perk with that is that you do not have to be a county resident in order to get one of our virtual library cards. And if you are a library super nerd, you can get a library card to about 10 different libraries in the area and power through all of their ebook collections. So visit our website at pgcmls.info for all of the good access to the ebooks and such. Before we go, I just want to plug a few of our upcoming events, some of which are with the Human Relations Commission and others which are not, but we're all one happy family, so it's all kind of the same at this point. So Tuesday night next week, we are really thrilled to be hosting the National Book Launch event for author Alina Boyden, whose new fantasy novel Gifting Fire is published on Tuesday, April 3rd by Penguin Random House. Huge deal that we're getting to host that national launch event. So check that out at 7 p.m. Also coming up, we have a new weekly series on Wednesdays at 4 p.m. in April of bilingual virtual workshops for teens presented in English and Spanish. These are things on like Microsoft Office competencies and other things like that will help you with work and school and all the above. We're coming back at the end of the month with several events with the Human Relations Commission. On April 21st, we're talking about the Academy Stories and Admissions Project with Ellen Ann Fentress, W. Ralph Eubanks, and Paulette Boudreau. That's 4/21 at 7 p.m. And then we have the return of The Elephant We Don't See Diversity Dialogue on April 27th. We'll be discussing the miseducation of the Negro. And then because that's not enough, we'll be back on April 29th to discuss Asian Pacific American bias, which is, of course, a dire and urgent problem that we all need to kind of wrap our brains around and do a better job of standing up for our neighbors. So much more to come. Happy Thursday. It's Friday Eve. We made it. Be safe, be well, everyone. If you need help getting a vaccine, call the library's hotline, which is, I'm going to give you the number, and I'm not going to give you the wrong number, so I'm going to pull it up just to make sure. It's 240-392-3622, 240-392-3622. We can help you in English and Spanish to get you on pre-registration lists and hopefully find you a vaccine appointment very quickly, regardless of the provider type. So check that out and be safe, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks.